The last time I saw my dad healthy, he was standing in the garage, wiping grease off his hands with that same faded red rag he always kept in his back pocket. He had a habit of talking to his tools like they were co-workers, mumbling things like, "Come on, buddy, don't give up on me now," while fiddling with some rusty bolt. That was just his way, quiet, stubborn, and deeply rooted in the kind of loyalty that doesn't come with grand speeches or teary hugs. I'm Francis, 33 now, and for most of my life, I was the background sibling. The one who didn't make waves, didn't bring home trophies, didn't explode at family dinners. I was just there. Until I wasn't. Until I left for college and then for work, quietly carving out a life of my own in another city, answering family group texts with the occasional thumbs up or sounds good. My older brother, Darren, always had the spotlight. He was the golden child, varsity football, loud laugh. Always seemed to know someone wherever he went. My sister, Mia, younger than me by 5 years, was the baby of the family, with a string of almost careers and short-lived passions that Dad always tried to encourage, even when they fizzled out. Growing up, they were louder, flashier, and frankly, more exhausting. I didn't have the energy for their drama or their constant need to be seen. And Dad, he just let us be who we were. He showed love in practical ways. Changing the oil in your car, remembering how you take your coffee, driving 4 hours to help you move without ever needing to be asked. It wasn't perfect. There were things we didn't talk about. But there was love. And there was respect. It started slow. A cough that wouldn't go away. Then fatigue. Then a scan. And the word that turns everything into static. Cancer. Stage 4. The kind that doesn't play fair. I got the call from Dad himself. His voice was calm, even casual, like he was just telling me the weather. I asked if he was okay, and he chuckled. "I've had better Mondays." That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. I asked when I should come. He hesitated, said, "No need to drop everything." But he didn't mean it. Not really. I could hear it. He wanted me there. And I came. I packed my apartment into storage, told my job I needed an indefinite leave, and drove back to the house I hadn't lived in since I was 22. The siding was still chipped. The lawn was mostly crabgrass. But the porch light still flickered the same way it did when I was a kid sneaking in past curfew. I moved into my old bedroom, now crowded with medical supplies and paperwork. I took him to every appointment, managed the prescriptions, fought with insurance, cooked meals, cleaned up after him on the hard days. And they were mostly hard days. Some days he couldn't get out of bed. Others, he'd joke around and pretend nothing was wrong, even when his hands shook too badly to hold a spoon. Darren visited once in the first 2 months. Showed up in a pressed shirt, brought a bottle of bourbon like this was some holiday visit. He stayed an hour, maybe less. Talked mostly about his job, how his boss was riding him, how stress'll kill ya. Dad just nodded along. When he left, I walked him to the door. I asked if he could maybe take a weekend to help out. He said, "Man, I'd love to, but you know how it is. Work's nuts. Plus, Amanda's been on me about not being home enough." Mia called now and then. She cried a lot over the phone. Said she felt guilty. Said she missed Dad. Said she wanted to help. But somehow, she never made it back home. She was always trying to figure things out, or just not in a good place emotionally. One time she Venmo'd me $30 and texted, "Get something nice for Dad." I didn't reply. I bought more adult diapers and electrolyte drinks. I didn't keep score. At least, I didn't think I did. I wasn't doing it to be a hero. I was doing it because he was my dad. Because he'd been there when I dislocated my shoulder and couldn't even pull my shirt over my head. Because he drove through a snowstorm to bring me my phone charger when I forgot it before a big trip. Because he gave more than he took, always. But somewhere in the quiet moments, after the house was dark, after Dad had fallen asleep with the TV humming, I'd wonder if they'd feel the weight of their absence. If they'd ever say thank you. If they'd even notice the toll it was taking on me. One day, after a particularly brutal round of chemo, Dad reached over and gripped my arm. His voice was barely a whisper. "Don't let them spin it. You've been here." I just nodded. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. He passed on a Tuesday. Peacefully, they said. But peace is a strange word when someone's body has been a battlefield for months. Darren flew in the next day, made a whole show at the wake, talking about how strong Dad had been, how family meant everything to him. Mia posted a picture of an old birthday party on Instagram with a broken heart emoji and a caption that read, "Fly high, Daddy." I didn't say much, just shook hands, thanked people for coming, and made sure the caterer showed up on time. 2 weeks later, we were in the lawyer's office. The air was thick with fake smiles and the scent of overbrewed coffee. Darren had that smug look he always wore when he thought he was about to win something. Mia was scrolling through her phone, probably crafting another heartfelt post. I sat still, hands in my lap. The lawyer, a narrow man with a creased forehead, opened the folder and said, "Your father updated this 2 months ago." Darren leaned back, folded his arms like he already knew what came next. Mia didn't even look up. And me, I felt this odd calm settle over me, like the air before a storm. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. I didn't flinch when the lawyer read that line. I didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't shift in my seat. I'd spent too many months learning how to sit through things I couldn't control. I'd become an expert in silence. The lawyer's voice was steady, rehearsed, as he continued. "To my children, I leave the totality of my estate under one condition, that it be inherited by the child who demonstrates the greatest loyalty, not in words, but in action, and above all, by remaining silent during this reading." There was a beat of silence. You could feel the air change. Then it hit. Darren barked a short laugh like he couldn't help himself. "You've got to be kidding me." Mia finally looked up from her phone, confused at first, then skeptical. "Wait, what does that mean exactly? Is this, like, a joke clause or something?" The lawyer shook his head. "Your father was quite clear. I have it in writing, dated and signed. Whoever speaks during this meeting, who interrupts, protests, argues, asks questions, disqualifies themselves from inheritance." Darren's face twisted. "Oh, so now he's playing riddles from the grave?" The lawyer didn't respond. He turned the page and began listing the assets. Dad's house, 2 modest but fully owned cars, his savings and pension, a small plot of land upstate, and a separate account marked for final expenses that I had already used for the funeral. All told, it was just under $400,000 in value. Not life-changing money, but not pocket change either. And that's when Mia did it. Wait. You're saying all of that, everything, is going to go to one of us? Based on who can stay silent during this? That's absurd. The lawyer didn't even look up from his papers. "That was your father's wish." She scoffed. "That doesn't even make legal sense." "On the contrary," he said, finally lifting his eyes, "it's quite binding. And if no one qualifies, the assets will be liquidated and donated to the regional cancer center where your father received treatment." He was very specific about that, too. I stayed completely still. Darren leaned forward, voice low, but just loud enough. "So, what? You're just going to sit there and pretend this is normal?" His eyes darted to me. "Francis, you're okay with this?" I didn't answer. Not a single twitch. I kept my eyes on the wood grain of the conference table. Mia looked between us and whispered, "Oh my God, he thinks this is going to work in his favor." Darren straightened up, turning to the lawyer again. "You can't seriously enforce this. My dad was drugged up the last 2 months." Who knows what he meant? The lawyer nodded slowly, pulled out a notarized psychological assessment dated 3 weeks before Dad passed. It clearly stated that he was of sound mind and full legal capacity. Darren's mouth opened again, but the lawyer raised a hand. "Mr. Parker, I'd advise you not to say anything else. Your father's wording was unambiguous. Your verbal participation has already been documented." Darren shut his mouth, but his face turned the color of old brick. From that point on, the room stayed quiet. For the next 10 minutes, the lawyer read through the finer details. Power of attorney now void, healthcare directives fulfilled, bank accounts, legal transfers, tax obligations. I stayed still the entire time, my chest tight. I didn't let myself look at either of them. By the time we left the office, the silence between us was deafening. Darren stomped out first, his shoes hitting the tile like a threat. Mia followed, clutching her oversized tote bag like it could shield her from the humiliation. I walked out last. Outside, the sky had that flat, pale gray look, the kind that makes everything seem suspended in time. My car was parked at the far end of the lot. I didn't expect them to wait. I didn't expect much from them anymore. But what I didn't expect, what truly floored me, was what came next. 2 days after the reading, I came home from running errands and found Mia sitting on Dad's porch steps, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like a shield. She looked up as I pulled into the driveway. "You need to fix this," she said before I even turned off the engine. I stepped out slowly, feeling that familiar weight settle on my shoulders. Fix what? This, whatever game you're playing. It's cruel, Francis. I let out a dry laugh. Game? I didn't write the will, Mia. She stood, her expression hardened. You manipulated him. That hit me like a slap, but I didn't show it. I took care of him. No, she said, stepping closer. You isolated him. You made him think we didn't care. You didn't come once, Mia. Not even when he asked. I couldn't. Her voice cracked. You think I wanted to be away? No. I think you didn't want to see how bad it was. So you didn't. Her lip trembled, but her eyes were full of fire. And now you're going to get everything because you played nurse? I stared at her for a long time. No. I get everything because I stayed quiet. She flinched. Then she stepped back, rummaged in her bag, and pulled out a small black notebook. He wrote in this, she said, holding it out. Every day, while you were here. I took it carefully, thumbing through the pages. Dad's handwriting, slanted and fading. I found it in his bedroom after the funeral, she continued. He wrote about you. How grateful he was. How guilty he felt about Darren and me. He wrote that he hoped the will would be fair. But I don't think he realized what it would do to us. I looked up from the notebook. He realized exactly what it would do. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked down the steps. Before she got in her car, she said, I don't know if I hate you or if I hate myself more. Then she was gone. That night, I read every page of the notebook. Most of it was about pain, about regret, about the quiet love he didn't know how to express. And in between, notes about us. One about how proud he was when I fixed the leak in the roof without asking. One about how he watched me drive him home from chemo and realized he didn't recognize my face anymore. I'd aged, grown tougher. Another about a night he cried alone in the kitchen because he overheard Mia on speaker saying she couldn't be around that kind of sadness right now. He didn't blame them, not really. But he knew who showed up. And who didn't. The next day, it was Darren's turn. I was heading out to the hardware store when I saw his car parked in front of the house. He was leaning against it like a cop in a movie. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, projecting authority. You proud of yourself? He asked as I approached. Not particularly, I said, brushing past him. He followed me. You know this isn't over, right? I stopped on the porch. I don't know what that means. It means, he said, stepping closer, that there are ways around this. We can contest the will. Make things public. Drag this whole thing through the courts. You think you're walking away with a payout and a sob story, but you're wrong. I stared at him. You'd rather destroy what little's left just to make sure I don't keep it. He didn't respond. You left him alone, I said quietly. You showed up for the photo ops, not the hard parts. You don't get it, he snapped. I had a life, a job, a family. You were the spare. You could afford to play the good son. It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. I didn't answer, just unlocked the front door. He called after me. If you think Dad was perfect, you're delusional. I turned back, and for the first time, my voice rose. He wasn't perfect, but he deserved better than to pass away wondering why his kids couldn't be bothered to hold his hand. Darren's face fell, just for a second. Then he recovered and muttered, Lawyer's gonna hear from mine. Then he was gone too. That night, I sat on the edge of Dad's bed, the notebook still in my hands, the house quiet except for the wind pressing against the windows. And that was the first time it hit me. Not the money, not the betrayal, but the loneliness of it all. The way grief doesn't come in sobs, but in long, quiet moments when you realize no one's going to knock on the door and make it better. No one's going to explain why things ended the way they did. And then, just as I started to drift off in that half-sleep that feels more like floating, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the lawyer. The subject line read, Additional addendum. Not to be opened until after the will reading. I sat up straight. My heart started pounding. I clicked. And what I read made my hands go cold. I must have read the email 5 times before I could even process what it was saying. It wasn't long, just a scanned, handwritten note from Dad, dated 2 days after the last will update. The subject line didn't do it justice. Not to be opened until after the will reading made it sound like a footnote. A loose end. But it wasn't. It was a final message. And the weight of it settled over me like a thick wool blanket. Francis, if you're reading this, then the will's been opened. And if things went the way I expected, your siblings probably lost their minds. Don't hold it against them. They were raised the same way you were. I just didn't know how to teach all three of you what I should have known myself. How to show up for people you love, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy. You taught me that at the end, and I'm sorry it took cancer to get me there. You're probably wondering why I put that clause in. Truth is, I didn't trust any of you to say what needed saying. I figured silence would be harder, because silence is where real things live. I wanted to see who would sit with the weight of this family and not flinch. You did. But this part here, this letter, this is for your eyes only. Not the lawyers, not the courts, just you. There's one more account. I never told anyone about it. It's not in the will. It's under your name. I started it when you were 16 and rebuilt that broken fence on your own while Darren was off with his friends and Mia was still learning how to spell hammer. I realized then that you were different, quieter, but steady. The kind of steady a man only appreciates when things start to fall apart. There's about $160,000 in it now. It's yours. No conditions. No performance clause. Just do something with it that matters. Doesn't have to be big. Just real. Thank you for not just being there when it counted, but for staying there. Even when no one saw. Dad, I didn't cry right away. That came later. The first thing I did was sit there, stunned, the glow of the email lighting up my face in the dark bedroom. My hands trembled, not from greed or excitement, but from the realization that someone had seen. That after all the noise, all the gaslighting, all the guilt-laced silence from my siblings, I wasn't invisible. I was never invisible to him. That broke me, but in a clean way, like a bone that had been healing crooked and finally snapped back into place. And then came the silence. For a while, the house was a tomb. Darren stopped texting. Mia's Instagram posts moved on from sad tributes to sunsets and oat milk lattes. The world, as it always does, went back to normal. But I didn't. I couldn't. The weight of everything lingered like smoke in the walls. I didn't want the house. I didn't want the cars. I didn't want the reminder of the last 6 months in every corner. So I sold it. Not right away. I took my time. Donated the furniture. Kept only the tools from the garage, Dad's wrench set, his stained red rag, a few old Polaroids of us fishing. I made a spreadsheet of everything else, cleared out the garage, cut the lawn one last time. The house went for a decent price, and I did what felt right. I split that part of the estate 3 ways. My portion, Mia's, Darren's. Even though they didn't earn it. Even though they didn't deserve it. But not a word from either of them when the checks cleared. No thanks. No call. Not even a hey, man, got the deposit. I wasn't surprised. But it still stung. So I left. I packed everything I owned into a used van, kept the wrench set in the passenger seat, and drove west with no real destination. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. It was the first time in my life I felt like I wasn't running from anything. I was just moving forward. That's when things began to change. It started small. I pulled into a town that felt like the kind of place Hallmark movies forget they already used 3 times. Brick storefronts. Coffee shops that smelled like actual coffee. People who looked you in the eye when they said good morning. I rented a room above a bakery. Started doing odd jobs. Fixing fences, replacing drywall, installing ceiling fans. Nothing flashy. Just work. Real, honest work. And it was like the world responded to that. One guy would refer me to another. Call Francis, they'd say. He's quiet, but he shows up. That phrase stuck with me. He shows up. After everything that had happened, that was the highest compliment I could imagine. One day, the owner of the bakery downstairs asked if I could help renovate the old barn behind her property. It had been sitting there for years, half collapsed, full of raccoons and broken dreams. I said sure. Took the job cheap. She let me stay rent-free for the month. It took longer than I expected, but when it was done, it looked alive again, like something out of a postcard. She cried when she saw it, said it reminded her of her father. That night, sitting on the floor with a bottle of cheap beer and a view of the stars, I realized I could build something here. Not just with tools, but with time, with consistency. So I used some of Dad's account. Not all of it. Just enough to register an LLC. Francis Repairs and Restoration. Got a used pickup truck. Painted my name on the side in simple letters. No flashy logo. Just a promise that I'd be there when I said I would. It grew faster than I expected. Within 6 months, I had too much work for one guy. Hired a local kid fresh out of high school. Taught him how to use a level, how to replace a breaker panel without frying himself. Told him the first rule was to listen more than you speak. He said that was weird. I told him it'd make sense one day. A year later, I had 4 guys working under me. We did kitchen remodels, porch repairs, even historic restorations. I paid them fair, covered their insurance, bought lunch on Fridays. Word got around. People trusted us because we showed up. Meanwhile, Darren's life was unraveling in the background. I didn't look for the news, but it found me. A mutual friend from high school reached out, said Darren had gotten hit with a lawsuit. Something about tax fraud, inflated billing at his company. Nothing criminal, not yet. But he'd been placed on administrative leave. His wife had moved out, took the kids. Mia, on the other hand, started a podcast, Healing Through Chaos. I only listened to 1 episode. It was 15 minutes of her talking about grief, how she'd been robbed of closure, how toxic people had manipulated her family's legacy. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. I turned it off before it ended. That's when I realized something. They hadn't moved on. Not really. They were still trying to rewrite the story in their heads, trying to cast themselves as the wounded heroes in a drama they barely showed up for. But it didn't matter anymore, because I wasn't part of that story. Not anymore. I was building something else. One afternoon, I got a call from the local community center. The roof was leaking. The town didn't have the budget to fix it before winter. I said I'd take a look. Brought the team with me. We did it on a Saturday, free of charge. The next week, a little girl from the after-school program dropped off a hand-drawn thank you card. Crayon stick figures standing on a brand new roof. In the corner, she wrote, "Thank you, Mr. Francis, for saving our ceiling and our snack time." That card's still pinned to the wall of my office. I don't know when it happened exactly, when the grief stopped feeling like a weight and started feeling like a compass. When the loneliness stopped being a punishment and started being a choice. But somewhere along the way, I stopped waking up angry. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. And then, 2 years after the will reading, I got a letter. A real one. Not an email. Not a text. Handwritten. From Mia. Just 1 sentence. "He was right about you." No return address. No follow-up. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That same week, a man showed up outside my workshop. Early 50s. Business casual. Looked lost. It was Darren. He didn't speak right away. Just stood there, staring at the logo on the side of my truck like it held some answer he didn't understand. I stepped outside, wiping sawdust from my hands. Waited. He looked older. Defeated. Finally, he said, "You got a minute?" I nodded. "Sure." He stepped closer. "You probably heard what happened." I did. He looked down. "I lost everything, man. The job. The house. Amanda's staying with her sister. Kids don't talk to me." I didn't say anything. He shifted awkwardly. "I've been thinking about Dad a lot." Still, I said nothing. He looked up, eyes red. "He left you everything. For a reason." I didn't get it then, but I do now. That's when I realized what this was. Not a reconciliation. Not a reunion. But the beginning of something. Maybe. And then he said something I'll never forget. He stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, swaying slightly like he was deciding whether to speak or just walk away. There was a look in Darren's eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not pity, not that condescending smirk he wore at every Thanksgiving dinner when I said something he didn't expect me to know. This time, it was just hollow, like a man who had finally run out of stories to tell himself. "I messed it all up," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I didn't say anything. I could have. God knows I had enough ammunition. I could have reminded him of every smug insult, every time he no-showed when Dad needed him, every whisper to extended family about how I was making it worse by enabling Dad's drama. But I didn't, because what he said next felt like the first real thing he'd said to me in decades. "I think I wanted to win even after he passed away," he said, voice cracking. Like I could still come out on top somehow. But it never really was a competition, was it? "No," I finally said. "It wasn't." He nodded, and I still lost. He turned to leave, but then paused. "I was going to ask for money," he admitted, looking down at his shoes. "That's why I came. But I'm not going to do that. I don't know. I didn't know where else to go." And then he left. Just like that. No apology. No dramatic breakdown. Just a broken man walking away from the one person he thought might still see him as a brother. I stood there a long time after he disappeared around the corner. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because something in me had started ticking, like a watch that had finally been wound. The silence hadn't just kept me sane, it had become my weapon. And for the first time since the will reading, I realized I wasn't powerless. I had something they didn't. Not the money, not the house, not even Dad's name. I had time. Time to build something real. Time to observe. Time to prepare. And I'd been doing it, quietly, all along. See, when I first started Francis Repairs and Restoration, I didn't just register the name for kicks. I filed paperwork that allowed me to branch into general contracting, custom design, and eventually property acquisition. Small scale at first, helping people renovate homes, flip fixer-uppers, build rentable cabins on spare land. The work was honest, the clients loyal, and the money slowly began to add up. But then something happened. A woman named Ellen, whose attic I had reinforced after a winter storm, pulled me aside one day and asked if I'd be interested in a long-term project. "My brother's selling his lake house," she said. "It's falling apart, but the bones are good. Just doesn't want to deal with the hassle. You interested?" I told her maybe. She gave me the address. I didn't recognize it until I pulled up the listing later that night. It was Dad's old fishing spot. Not the one we went to as kids, but the lake just 15 minutes from there, where we'd gone once, during that final summer before his diagnosis, to sit on the dock and listen to crickets. He'd pointed to a line of trees across the water and said, "I always wanted to build something over there. A place that just breathes quiet." That memory had haunted me ever since. So when I saw the asking price, dirt cheap, because the place needed gutting, I said yes. I cashed in a portion of the secret account, paid in full. No mortgage, no partner, just me, a crumbling lake house, and a promise I hadn't realized I'd made. It took 6 months to restore it. I didn't rush. I handpicked the crew, made sure every board, every nail, every strip of siding was placed with care. I designed the main room around the view of the water, installed big bay windows that made you feel like you were floating, turned the attic into a library loft with a reading nook under the rafters. The kitchen had old copper fixtures and butcher block counters. And on the back porch, I carved a quote into the railing. "Some things are built in silence." It was Dad's. He'd scribbled it once on a grocery list when we were working on the garage together. I never forgot it. When it was done, I didn't list it. I didn't rent it out. I just kept it, visited it on weekends, let it sit there, untouched, like a monument to quiet strength. I thought maybe I'd bring someone there one day. Maybe I'd write in it, or just watch the seasons change. But something about that house changed me, and it gave me an idea. You ever realize your revenge has already started before you even know you're planning it? That's what this was. It didn't come with red string and diagrams and checklists. It came with silence, with choices, with seeds planted carefully in soil no one else bothered to look at. Darren had burned every bridge in his industry. But Mia was doing something new. She was gaining traction. Her podcast had sponsors now, a modest following. I knew this because I followed it anonymously. I wasn't angry, just curious. She'd started selling merch, had a Patreon. She even gave TED-style talks at corporate retreats about grief, boundaries, and sibling toxicity. She'd reinvented herself into a victim, branded herself as the misunderstood middle child who got caught in the crossfire of a manipulative older brother and a dying parent's unresolved trauma. She never said my name, but she didn't need to. Anyone who heard the full story would know. I listened to one of her episodes in full while sanding deck boards for the lake house. She said, "Sometimes, the people who claim to be the most loyal are just trying to inherit the silence they forced everyone else into." That one stung, not because it was clever, but because it worked. Her version of the story was getting traction. And here's where things took a turn. One of my crew guys, Kyle, pulled me aside after work and asked if I'd ever heard of this grief influencer girl. He'd seen her speak at his cousin's tech firm. She had this whole bit about toxic families and sibling betrayal, he said. Kinda sounded familiar, honestly. I shrugged it off. But later that night, I pulled up her YouTube, watched a clip of her being interviewed, and then I saw it. Behind her, on a bookshelf in her apartment, was a photo of Dad. My photo. The one I'd taken during his last lucid week, sitting in the backyard, smiling at something the neighbor's dog had done. It was cropped and filtered, but I knew the original. She'd taken it from my private cloud folder, one I'd accidentally shared with the family for the funeral slideshow and forgotten to revoke access to. That was the line. That's when I stopped being quiet. But not in the way they expected. I didn't start posting. I didn't go on Twitter. I didn't call her out. That would have been too easy, too loud. Instead, I started collecting things. Emails, dated voicemails, the will, the addendum, the notebook Mia had given me then walked away from. I had proof of care directives, dated medical records, financial logs, all of it, and something else. One of Dad's old friends from his truck shop reached out to me months ago, said he had a letter from Dad, something personal that he never sent. I hadn't read it, not then, but now I did. In it, Dad talked about his disappointment, about how he'd left things too open for interpretation. He mentioned Mia by name, says she always had a way with stories. But stories don't build houses. They don't hold your hand at 2 a.m. when your kidneys are failing. That line hit like a freight train. I scanned it, archived it. Then I started planning. I reached out to a quiet PR consultant, someone I'd met through a renovation client who worked in brand rehab. I asked what it would take to counter a public narrative without saying a single word on camera. She smiled. It's amazing what people believe when the receipts are neat. So we started building a timeline. Quietly, carefully. Every missed visit, every silent phone log, every hospital note. I had signatures. I had messages from Mia where she said, "I can't deal with that energy right now." I had her own words, her own contradictions. Her podcast bio even falsely stated she held her father's hand in his final moments. She hadn't been in the state. I didn't want to destroy her. I really didn't. But I couldn't let her rewrite my silence into guilt. So I waited for the perfect moment. And when it came, when she announced her first live grief workshop, selling $500 tickets for a weekend of healing storytelling, I reserved a seat under a fake name. I planned to sit in the front row, and in my bag, I'd carry a folder, one she wouldn't see coming. But when I opened it, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't accuse her. I'd just show up. The venue was one of those repurposed warehouse spaces that tried a little too hard to feel rustic. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from long cords, folding chairs in neat rows. The air smelled like bergamot and chai, and there was soft instrumental music playing overhead. On stage, a banner read, "Healing through chaos, finding peace in the aftermath of family trauma." I arrived 20 minutes early under the name Martin Ellis, printed on a laminated badge. A small lie to get a front row seat. I wore a navy flannel, clean jeans, and work boots. Nothing that stood out. The man at the sign-in table handed me a folder with the event schedule and a branded pen. I tucked it into my satchel next to my folder, the one that had taken me 2 years to assemble. I sat in the front row, third seat from the center. Mia wouldn't see me until she was already on stage. She came out 5 minutes late, wearing a flowing gray cardigan over a black dress, hairstyle just messy enough to look natural. She held a wireless mic and opened with a breathy, practiced tone. "Thank you all for being here. This space isn't just about grief. It's about reclaiming our narratives." There were maybe 70 people in the audience. Young professionals, a few older women in scarves, 2 men who looked like podcast junkies. One woman in the back was already crying. Mia spoke for 20 minutes. Her talk followed the usual arc: early family bonds, a toxic shift in dynamic, the slow erosion of trust. She didn't name names, but she said "my older brother" 4 times. She described a sibling who weaponized silence, who took advantage of a dying parent's trust, who rewrote the truth by sitting still long enough to look innocent. And then she pulled up the photo, the one she'd stolen. It flashed behind her on the projector screen. "This was the last time I saw my father smile," she said. That was a lie. She wasn't there. I was. That was the moment I stood up. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I stepped calmly onto the stage. Security didn't move. They probably thought I was part of the show. Mia froze. Her mouth hung open for a second, like she couldn't compute what was happening. And then she recognized me. The room went silent. I turned to the audience and held up a manila folder. "This won't take long," I said, projecting my voice calmly. "You've been told a story. I'm here to give you the rest of it." Mia tried to speak, but I gently raised a hand. "You've had your turn." I opened the folder. First, I handed out 3 copies of Dad's original will. Then the notarized addendum. Then the psych evaluation confirming he was of sound mind. Next, I projected hospital records, dated logs of visits. Only one name on the sign-in sheet. Again and again, mine. I showed text messages, voicemails from Mia. "I just can't be around that right now, Francis. You handle it." Emails to the funeral director asking me to send a quick summary. "I don't think I can come." A screenshot of the shared folder access log. Hers, 2 weeks after the funeral. That's where she got the photo. I ended with the notebook. Dad's words. A paragraph I highlighted. Francis is the one who stayed. I don't know if Darren or Mia ever understood what love looks like when it's quiet. But Francis does. And that's why this will go the way it goes. I closed the folder. No shouting. No dramatic monologue. Just facts. Dated. Verified. Undeniable. The audience was silent. Mia looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Someone in the third row whispered, "Is this real?" A woman next to her leaned over and asked, "Why would he lie? He's not selling tickets." That's when Mia's mic slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow thud. She reached for it, but I had already stepped down. I walked out of the room without looking back. I heard nothing from her for days, but the fallout came fast. The clip went viral. Not because I posted it, I didn't. Someone from the audience did. It hit Twitter, then Reddit. Man crashes sister's grief workshop with evidence she lied about their dad's death. It made national headlines in a slow news cycle. Commenters took sides. Most sided with me. A few accused me of being cruel, ambushing her like that. But I didn't care. I wasn't there for them. I was there to reclaim my silence. Sponsors dropped her within a week. Patreon suspended her account pending platform integrity review. She posted a teary video trying to explain that memory is subjective, that everyone processes grief differently. The comments shredded her. You can only build a brand on pain if the pain is real. A month later, I got a letter. Typed. No signature. Just a single sentence. You win. You always wanted to win. I folded it in half and tossed it in the fire pit. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about winning. This was about finishing the story. As for Darren, the fallout hit him differently. After the workshop went viral, a journalist connected the dots between him and the business scandal that had been swept under the rug. It made the local paper. Then his former company opened an internal audit. He wasn't charged, but his professional reputation was scorched. Last I heard, he was working contract jobs, living in a rented apartment in the suburbs. Still estranged from his kids. He called once. I didn't answer. He didn't leave a voicemail. Eventually, people stopped talking about it. Mia deleted most of her social media. Darren's name faded from the articles. But mine stayed steady. Quiet. I didn't try to ride the wave. I didn't monetize it. I just went back to the work. Francis Repairs and Restoration doubled its contracts that year. I hired 2 more people. Opened a second office in a nearby town. Took on a local historic preservation project. A cathedral that needed its steeple rebuilt. I worked on it myself. Every board, every shingle, every beam. One Saturday, I drove back to the lake house. Fall had just started to touch the trees. The water was still. I stepped out onto the back porch and ran my fingers over the carving on the railing. Some things are built in silence. I sat in the deck chair, listening to the wind in the branches, the soft creak of the dock. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel cheated. I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I had built something from the ashes. Not revenge. Resolution. And in the end, that was enough. Because the loudest truth is the one no one sees coming. And silence, when wielded with purpose, speaks louder than any scream. So I leaned back, folded my hands behind my head, and smiled. Let them tell whatever stories they want. I know how it really ended.